Abby Johnson has always been fiercely determined to help women in need. This desire is what led Abby to a career with Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion provider, and caused her to flee the organization, becoming an outspoken advocate for the pro-life movement. I met Abby this summer at a pro-life event that we were speaking at together in Washington, D.C., and I got to tell you, this lady is the real deal, and she's joining me today to talk about the future of the pro-life movement in a post-Biden era. Where do we go from here? We're going to answer that question today. This is the Heidi St. John podcast. Stick around. I think you're going to be encouraged. So, Abby girl, welcome back to the show. Great to see you.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
So this is an amazing time, I think, to sort of be alive. We just watched the election results come in last week, and obviously clean sweep now for Donald Trump. Looks like the House, the Senate, obviously the entire executive branch. And I am wondering, because I'm sure you and I haven't talked about this a whole lot, but I am pretty frustrated with the Republican Party's sloppy, wording on the pro-life issue now. It seems like they're sliding on a lot of social issues. We've sort of been, sort of moving more to the left. People say, well, we're trying to get votes, and I understand that. But I want to know what you thought about the election results and sort of how we can use what's happening now, because I feel like we've got a little bit of high ground, use what's happening now to really become better at the defense of life in this country.
Yeah, I mean, I share the frustration. I don't think that it was the right move to remove, the pro-life planks from the GOP platform. I mean, number one, I think it's completely unnecessary. I think abortion wins it just does. Like, it wins among Republicans. I actually had a very intense breakfast with one of the lead policy advisors for Trump's campaign. And I just asked him directly. I said, does Donald Trump's poll numbers go up when he puts out some sort of moderate position on abortion? And he flat out told me no.
Right.
It's not helping him to moderate on abortion. It's just not. But I think he loses ground, actually, with the pro-life movement when he does take this moderate stance. And this same guy literally looked me in the face when I said that. I told him, I said, you're losing voters. And he looked me in the face and said, we don't need the pro-life vote to win.
Wow.
So I don't believe in any way, shape, or form that Donald Trump cares about the pro-life issue at this moment. I don't believe that he feels like he needs to cater to the pro-life movement. Certainly, he has not catered to the pro-life movement during this current election. He's basically kind of snubbed us at every turn and has told us, I will not pass any kind of ban, not even a late-term abortion ban, which I've never believed that Donald Trump is pro-life. But I have always believed that Trump hates late-term abortion. And he has made that clear over and over again, that sort of this radical late abortion, after a child is viable, certainly most people, even Democrats, can get behind that and say, that's too far. We don't agree with that.
Right.
But he wouldn't even come out and say, I'll sign a late-term abortion ban. He's just said over and over again, no, I'm not going to sign a ban, any kind of ban. I'm fine with chemical abortion pills. I'm not going to do anything to restrict chemical abortion, even though over 60% of abortions are now committed by pill. We know in the next 2 years that's going to be increased to probably over 80%. So he's not the pro-life president that we want. He's certainly not the pro-life president that we need. Now, when we look holistically at our country, is he 100,000 million times better than Kamala Harris?
Yes. Yes.
Did
Yeah.
we have any other choice in the
Nope.
matter? No, we didn't, right? It's like kind of like which toilet bowl do you want to stick your head in, right? The one with poop in it or the one without poop in it. Like that's kind of where we were. But do I think that we have made a significant gain in the pro-life movement by getting Trump into office? No, I don't. Do I think that that our economy is going to be better so that it is more appealing to have children? Yes, I do. So I think when we look at kind of the bigger picture, I think we are creating a more pro-life world. But when I look at legislation, I don't think that we have moved forward.
I campaigned, really hard for President Trump. A lot of his policies, in fact, I'd say 95% of them, I'm a super fan of. I'm a super fan of his position on the border. I'm a super fan of his position with regard to Israel. Obviously, with the economy, there are so many things that I think he's going to do that are going to be great for the country. I was very disappointed, mostly to see the GOP. I mean, forget Trump for a second. The Republican Party has gotten really sloppy on this issue. And you just rightly pointed out, they're removing the planks of the pro-life platform from the GOP. And I frankly think it's going to hurt us in the long run. But I am encouraged by one thing, and I love to see if you feel encouraged by this as well. I at least think that now we've got an opportunity. If Kamala Harris had gotten into the White House, there goes your opportunity, because every radical pro-abortion activist in the nation would have taken that as a green light to move the abortion agenda even farther to the center of the country than it is right now. But I think we've got an opportunity to at least make the case for life. Would you agree?
Yeah, I do. And I think one thing that even, well, let me say this. I think the GOP removed the pro-life plank because of Trump. Okay. So I think that, and this is the other thing. So the thing that made me the most encouraged about Trump's, I guess, even though his kind of lack of pro-life position became very apparent in this election, his choice of running mate in JD Vance was very encouraging to me,
Yes.
because I know JD Vance's stance on abortion. And even though he kind of had to puppet like whatever Trump was saying during the election, I know JD Vance to be a very committed Christian, and I know he's a very committed pro-lifer. I know he's a pro-lifer without any exceptions. I know he's 100% committed to protecting the unborn from abortion. So that actually gave me a lot of hope, because I expect that Vance will be running in 2028. And I know him to be a principled Christian conservative. And so that gave me a lot of hope for the future. But I think that the GOP was sort of catering to Trump's message on pro-life issues. And that's why they decided to remove the pro-life plank from the platform. I'm hoping that if we do get a real principled Christian conservative in the White House in 2028, which of course is the prayer, that maybe the GOP, because of, let's say it's JD Vance, because of JD Vance's encouragement, that maybe they would put that pro-life plank back in. That's kind of the hope. That's the prayer, is that they would see that being pro-life, that standing against the unborn, standing against, the most vulnerable among us, standing against the destruction of the most vulnerable among us, that would be something that they see is a winning argument. Kamala Harris ran her entire election on the death and destruction of the innocent.
Yeah.
And I think she sees now that bringing out one rapper after another to twerk on her, her election stage, and talking about abortion rights, clearly that wasn't the winner that she thought it was.
Right.
People have spoken, and they have spoken and told the American public that it's not just about abortion for them. The border is important. Our economy is important. wanting to mutilate our children in order to transition them, the fake transitioning, that's
Yeah.
important. Some of the most marginalized voices in our world today are detransitioners.
Yep.
People aren't even listening to them and listening to their heartbreak. And so I think their voices were heard in
Mm-hmm.
this election, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're being heard. They're saying, like, this is not good for kids. Right. I think mama bears really spoke out in this
Absolutely.
election,
Mm-hmm.
saying, what's happening in our libraries? What are you giving to our kids to read? I mean, so many people, I think, stood up. The working class stood up and said, no, you're not taking this, you're not taking our economy away from us. Inflation is crazy. Crime is crazy. So I think the working class stood up. I think moms stood up. But I do not think that they did all that they could have done in the pro-life movement. I do have hope, though, that there are going to be the right people in positions in cabinet positions, and the right people surrounding Trump
Yeah.
to put good pro-life practices in place. That's what happened last time, to protect our doctors,
Mm-hmm.
protections of conscience for
Mm-hmm.
doctors and nurses. Kamala Harris was talking about removing conscience protections
Yeah.
for
Terrifying.
doctors and people in the medical field. That is crazy. Doctors have always had conscience protections. And she was saying, no, we're going to remove those because abortion is a basic health care right.
Yeah.
Abortion is not health care. It's the killing of an innocent human being. That's the antithesis of healthcare. So she was talking about removing those. Now we know with Trump, no matter where he stands on abortion, we know that he is going to enforce conscience protection. That's something that's very important. And the people that he put at HHSC when he was in place, they were good, strong, pro-life people.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, the people that he surrounds himself with are even more important than he himself and what he
Mm-hmm.
believes. I think the fact that we have the majority in the Senate and the majority in the House is incredibly important as well. I think we can actually get some things done
Mm-hmm.
right now. And I actually think now is a really good time to test Trump on what he said about signing a ban. Let's go ahead and let's get the House and Senate to pass a late term abortion ban.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine that Trump would not sign a late term abortion ban. As much
Mm-hmm.
as he has spoken about the barbarity and the evil of killing a baby after the point of viability, I just cannot imagine that he would not sign a ban to stop late term abortion. I can't imagine it. And I think now that we have the majority in the Senate and the House, I think now is the time to go ahead and test that and see what he'll really do.
Well, and I think too, he's come out very strong in the last couple of days and said he's going to immediately go after people that are performing the gender mutilation on children, right? Because he recognizes how evil and wrong it is and how vulnerable these kids are. Well, if people around him can make a case that it is just as evil and just as wrong and just as horrific and just as barbaric that our nation participates in late-term abortion as it does in gender reassignment, so-called reassignment surgery. Listen, I just watched a TikToker, a surgeon out of Seattle, Washington, so about 3.5 hours north of where I live. And he's talking about getting as many of these horrific surgeries done as he possibly can. He's like, I'm not even going to sleep. You see him going into the operating room and gloving up and all these things so that he can chop the healthy body parts off of mentally confused young people. Trump hates that. And he's come out very strongly and said, and rightly so, and said, I'm going to put a stop to this immediately. I think this might be the time to say, hey, can we also talk about the barbaric thing that's happening to babies in the womb as it relates to late-term abortion? People will say, well, Abby, late-term abortion is rare, it hardly ever happens. What's the truth about that?
So it's really not rare at all. Not when you look at the numbers. So, I mean, people will say, well, it's only, 2% of abortions or 1% of abortions. Well, we're performing like 1 million abortions a year, right, in this
Yeah.
country that are recorded. And a lot of those abortions go unreported. They go unrecorded, particularly because chemical abortion is now available in all 50 states. And those chemical abortions that people are getting, those pills that people are getting online. There's over 70 websites where women can go online and they can get chemical abortion pills. Those are unreported, they're unrecorded. They're coming in from over the border in Canada, Mexico, Belgium, China, France, India. These pills are coming in. They're completely unregulated. They're completely unreported. So these are just like a million that are being reported and recorded. Okay. So if you look at 1 or 2% of those, I mean, we're talking about tens of thousands of abortions that are done past the point of viability. Okay. So that's a lot. There's a lot of abortions. And according to the CDC, all right, so this is government reported numbers, there are about 400 to 500 babies out of those late term abortions that are born alive every single year. So if there's 400 to 500 that are reported, you know that there are many, many others that are being born alive and are not reported. And what happens to these babies? Well, I can tell you, based on the testimonies that we've received from our ministry, and then there were none, our ministry helps get abortion clinic workers out of the abortion clinics and helps transition them into a life-affirming relationship with Jesus Christ. And based on that, based on the numbers that we have received from women who have left the abortion industry, we've helped over 700 now. We're almost to 750. We are hearing from these workers that it's happening on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
That babies are being born alive on a weekly basis in these abortion facilities, that they're being left to drown, that their necks are being snapped, that their spinal cords are being cut with scalpels, sometimes with regular household scissors. They're being left to suffocate on their own lungs. Terrible, terrible, barbaric things are happening to these babies. We have a testimony from one worker that left a clinic in Orlando that the mother, it was a 30-week-old baby, the mother left, she passed her baby into the toilet, and they listened to the baby paddle until they heard it drown.
Oh my gosh.
And these are things that are happening in clinics all across the country. And we're hearing them from hundreds of abortion clinic workers, former abortion clinic workers. This is not rare. This is not like a one-off. This is systemic murder that is happening inside of these abortion facilities.
So true. It's so true. I wonder too, it seems like there's a callousness. I don't know if you heard Bill Maher talking about this issue on his show. It's been a couple of months ago now. On his closing monologue, he was saying, he actually said, I have a lot of respect for people in the pro-life movement who genuinely believe that it's murder. He said, if you think that it's murder, then you should absolutely stand up and say, nope, I don't want to do this. I think it's a human life. Bill said, I think it's a human life too. I just don't care. And it was so shocking to me. And I think this is sort of where we've fallen as a country now, because you've made the case for life, right? No one can deny the humanity of a child in the womb. So now you have to shift the conversation to a callousness and a searing of the conscience of the human heart to say, I don't care. How do we get that back again? How do we soften people's hearts toward the suffering of the unborn?
Yeah, I actually have a lot more respect for pro-abortion people who are willing to say,
tell the truth.
Like Bill Maher, who are willing, which actually I think Bill Maher has been one of the most honest.
Yep.
Over the past 6 months, I feel like he's been one of the most honest media commentators in the business.
Me too. Yeah. And we can disagree with him, but appreciate that he's honest. At least he's not lying and gaslighting people.
Exactly. I mean, look, I have a lot more respect for someone who's willing just to say to me, I know it's a life. I know it's a human being. I recognize what it is. I just believe that women's rights supersede the rights of the child in the womb. Like I have much more respect for that than just being completely dishonest and saying like it's not a life, right. It's not a baby, it's not a human being.
The lady, what's that famous picture?
It's not a heartbeat. It's heart tones.
Like,
ridiculous.
Or the lady, the 8-month pregnant woman with her belly exposed, and on her belly she's written "not yet human." Mm-hmm. That is so intellectually dishonest and so stupid that it boggles the imagination that someone could actually say that out loud. At least Bill Maher is going, yeah, it's a person, but I just don't care.
I just don't care. And that, this is the thing though, Heidi. I think I don't know that there's anything that you can say to people that believe that know it's a human being and just don't care if you kill it. Like, I don't know that there's anything you can say to really change their minds. What I do know, I mean, I think that just takes like a Holy Spirit encounter. What I do know, though, is that the younger people, I go and speak on campuses all the time, on high school, but primarily university campuses. And I know from my own daughter, my oldest daughter is going to be 18 next week. And I know she's a senior, and I listen to, what her classmates and stuff are saying. And they're all 100% pro-life. They go to the March for Life every year. And these college kids that I'm talking to, regularly, and what I'm hearing from them is this: they are 100% no compromise pro-lifers. I mean, no exceptions, no compromise. They believe abortion is murder. And I think this is why. I've kind of boiled it down to this thing. They recognize the humanity in themselves. They recognize, if I asked my daughter Grace, if I said, if I asked any of my kids, what's the first picture that mom has of you? They would all say their ultrasound picture. I think ultrasound technology and medical technology has really changed the game for our young people, because they can look at an ultrasound image of themselves and say, "Oh, that was me," right? And it's still me
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, my mom, I'm 44, my mom did not have an ultrasound with me.
Yeah.
And so I think it's easier to make the disconnect when you don't see the child in the womb. But now, like, when you see your own humanity in the womb, and then you recognize that I still have that same humanity now, I think that's made such a difference for these young people. And I see them last year when I went to the March for Life, and I was up on stage at the March for Life. There's hundreds of thousands of people, and I look out and there's so many kids. They're like
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah. A lot of young people.
And on the front row, there was this all boys Catholic school, and just all these young men at the front, right? I mean, like, probably over 100 of them. And they were just so pumped, right? And they were just so excited, and they were yelling and all these pro-life chants and everything. And I was like, this is it. This is how we're going to change our country. This is how we are going to revolutionize and change our culture of death into a culture of life. It is going to be these young people
Yeah.
who have always seen the humanity in themselves. They've grown up seeing ultrasounds of their young brothers and their younger sisters, right? They've just always known it. They've always seen it. They've always recognized it. And they are also the most movable generation on these types of social issues. And we see that because they are the most influenced by social media. So if they can be influenced one way very easily based on like a TikTok video,
Yep.
that also shows they can be very easily moved in the other direction. We just have to present them with truth. And I have to tell you, Heidi, I go onto college campuses, and almost at every single one, a kid will get up at the mic and say, I used to be pro-choice, I watched your film Unplanned, and now I'm pro-life. That tells you that when they are presented with facts, when they are presented with truth, when they are presented with even anecdotal truth, their minds are movable. Their minds are able to be shaped to truth. And so we need to keep telling truth. We need to keep sharing the truth that we have, this knowledge that we have. Don't give up on our young people. Don't assume that their minds are made up and they're so stupid and this generation is so dumb and blah, blah, blah. No, this is our future. And I believe that the future is really, really bright because of our young Christian kids.
It's so encouraging, especially for me. I'm a little bit of a captive out here in the Pacific Northwest. I don't know if you saw the elections, but Washington State didn't move at all. I mean, Washington State actually went farther to the left, one of I think two states in the nation. And I mean, we're going to be doing a postmortem on this for a long time. I've got a lot of really strong opinions about why that's happening. But in terms of the pro-life argument, I had an idea and I pitched it to a group of about 400 people the other day who are very interested in politics and in the pro-life movement in particular. And I'm like, listen, if we're going to enshrine, like we just did in Missouri, if we're going to start to enshrine abortion into our constitutions, then we should also require that kids see what an abortion is. If this is what it is, and we want to celebrate this, and we're just a women's rights and yay, and women and freedom and all the thing, they should at least understand what they're voting for. And I would venture to guess, Abby, that most of the people that vote for these procedures do not even understand what they're voting for. They've never seen an abortion. A long, long time ago, I was shown a film. I think it was a film. I mean, this was a long, long time ago. It was called A Silent Scream. Do you guys, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, so that was a documentary. Yeah, it was put out by Dr. Bernard Nathanson, who used to be an abortionist. He was actually the number one abortionist in the 60s and 70s. He was called the king of abortion.
Wow.
In New York. He aborted over 75,000 children and even aborted his own child. And he and Larry Lader were the two founders of NARAL.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah,
Wow.
and he had a massive conversion in the 80s. And he grew up a Jew. He converted, and when he converted, he was an atheist, and he died a Christian. And he died several years ago. But when he left in 1984, he created the silent scream. And it was really when ultrasound technology was kind of first becoming mainstream.
Yeah.
And that film, you can still watch it on YouTube. It's a 4-part series, I think. I think it's 4 parts. That documentary, when it came out, it created a mass exodus of abortion doctors because they had never seen this before. They had never seen what was actually happening to the child in the womb during an abortion. And a ton of abortion doctors just put their instruments down and stopped doing abortions forever because of what Dr. Nathanson put out.
And don't you think the same thing would happen?
Oh, yeah.
If we showed abortion to our young people, if we I mean, it's amazing to me the number of people, even that I talk to when I'm out speaking. You know, people say, "Well, I'm pro-choice because women should have a right to choose." My first question always is, and have you ever seen an abortion? Have you ever witnessed an abortion? And 99.9% of them are like, "No, I never have." Mm-hmm. And I think if they saw it, it's just like what you were saying earlier about young people seeing their first picture as an ultrasound picture. They understand, oh, hey, that was me. Oh, hey, it's still me. I wonder if it would change the conversation, even with President Trump. I bet you he's never seen an abortion. I just wonder, does it matter, or do we have the conscience of the nation so seared that you got Bill Maher's everywhere who go, yeah, it's a baby, and I just don't care.
No, I think it does change the conversation. I think it changes so much, actually, because, I mean, it's like people watching my film Unplanned. Like, it showed what happens to the baby in the womb, right? And kids see it, they change their minds. Adults see it, they change their mind. Every single day that Unplanned was in theaters, it was in theaters for 14 weeks. Every single day I woke up, I had an email in my inbox from someone telling me, I went in to watch your film pro-choice and I came out pro-life. Because it actually shows the victim of abortion. The victim of abortion is the child in the womb. And it actually showed the victim. I remember when all that was going on with the BLM, riots and all this kind of stuff. And I remember there was a black guy, I think it was Philando Castile or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I remember he was one of the guys that got shot by a cop. And I remember the police footage was released, okay? And I clicked on it. And I started kind of watching it, and you get kind of sucked into it. And I was watching it, and you saw the guy get shot by the cops. and they thought he was reaching for something. Whatever it was justified. They thought he was reaching. They shot him. He died. And I'm 100% on the side of police and all this kind of stuff, right? But in that moment, watching a man be killed, I was like, oh my gosh, that was really shocking, right? And I was like, oh man, like it was bad. And I felt my heart like broke, right? In that moment for this man that was killed. And I thought to myself, this is why abortion continues, because you do not see the victim die.
Yes, it's true.
Like you can see the aftermath of abortion, you can see the baby parts and stuff like that. But I had seen that for years. I had seen the baby parts of the victims of abortion for years. That wasn't what changed my heart. It was seeing the baby fight for his life. It was seeing that humanity of the child. It was seeing that heart beating rapidly, beating so fast, trying to escape death, and seeing, oh my gosh, like that, the humanity of this child, it shared humanity with me, right? We're the same. We're different size. We're in clearly different places, but it's that same shared humanity. That is what changes hearts and minds on the issue of abortion. But I think it continues to be perpetuated. I think it continues to be promulgated and escalates in our country, in our world, because you do not see the victim die. And if there was a window to the womb,
Yep.
as babies were being killed by abortion, I believe abortion would stop.
Yep, I agree. I completely agree. And I don't believe, I talked to a young person recently and she said to me, well, there are humane forms of abortion. And I was like, no, there is not a single form of abortion that is humane. I said, do you understand what happens in a saline abortion? She's like, well, it just makes the fluid incompatible. I'm like, no, you scald a baby to death. Like the people do not understand. And I don't know, Abby, if there's a way to make it so that people if we're going to be educating people, I mean, look, we're educating children in our public schools about gender fluidity and the two-spirit and the all stupidity of the gender nonsense, but we're not educating them as to what happens in the womb and the miracle of life in the womb. And I think you're absolutely right. When I saw a silent scream, I was probably in my late teens at the time. I had nightmares. I was horrified, and I was already pro-life, right? But it still was horrifying to me. And I do think we could change the hearts and minds of people. I don't know how do we begin to get, because you're right, the images that they've seen forever of people holding up signs out in front of the Capitol and the baby parts and the, here's a quarter and here's a this. Yeah. People they're numb to it now because they've seen it all. How do you get the conversation moving towards saying, okay, we love abortion. Let's talk about abortion then. Let's see the thing for what it is, because the pro-abortion lobby in this country, that's the last thing they want. They don't want you to see what happens in the womb, right? So they're going to fight with everything that's in them to make sure that people never see what actually happens when a child is being murdered in the womb.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have to keep talking about it. I think we have to keep sharing. I think the other thing that they don't want people to know is how much we are willing to help women who are in crisis pregnancies. So, I mean, I think they don't want people to know how ready and available assistance is. So they want to keep that under wraps. They don't want people to know about pregnancy centers. They don't want people to know about, all of the medical help that's available for women, the maternity homes. They want to keep that under wraps, even in liberal places, even in Washington State, even in Oregon, even in California. Sometimes in those states, there's even more help than in conservative states, right? Because people have really stepped up their game because they know how large the fight is, right? They know how big the battle is there in those places. So a lot of times in those states, there's even more help than like in a state like Texas. So, the pro-abortion lobby is doing everything they can to make it seem like the pro-life movement is just a pro-birth movement.
Yes, I hate that.
That's not true. Who we are. But here's the thing. even if that was true, okay, even if we were people who are like, yeah, we don't care. We just want to get a woman to birth a baby and then we're going to dump her and leave her. Even if that was who we were, and it's not, but even if that was the case, abortion would still be wrong, right?
Yeah.
So it's not who we are, but even if it was, that's no excuse for abortion. So they try to act like, well, abortion's wrong because you're just pro-birth. And I'm like, no, abortion's wrong because it's the murder of an innocent baby. What happens afterward doesn't matter, right? What happens during the actual murder of the child, that's the problem. The problem is that you're murdering a child. The problem isn't whether she has support afterward. The problem is that there's a murder of an innocent human being. That's the problem. That's the actual problem. The solution is that there are a lot of services. There are a lot of resource help centers and all maternity homes and all different types of solutions, but they are trying to turn it into something that it's not. Like, well, abortion wouldn't be so bad if you guys had all of these. No, abortion is bad all the time.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to recognize. Whether there's help or not, it's murder all the time, every single time.
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk really quickly about RU 486 because people are talking about Plan B, and I saw a bunch of images here in Washington State. It's so funny. I mean, honestly, Abby, where I live, it's so funny. The pro-abort lobby here is just freaking out. They're just like, Trump's in the White House. You guys, the Plan B has a 4-year shelf life. Here's all these places in Washington State. Go stock up, because we want to stock up to make sure that in the unlikely event that we actually get pregnant, we can kill our unborn babies. It's almost a religion here.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about the chemical abortion and RU46 and what it actually does and why it's so important that we speak out against it.
Okay, so Plan B is a little bit different than RU46. Plan B is emergency contraception. It can be taken up to 72 hours after unprotected intercourse. It is sold over the counter, like everywhere, Walmart, all the pharmacies.
Vending machines have it.
Vending machines on college campuses, a lot of them have it. It is different than RU46. After a pregnancy has been implanted on the uterine wall, Plan B acts as contraception. It does not act as an abortion drug. So after that pregnancy is implanted on the uterine wall, Plan B is not going to disrupt that pregnancy, okay? RU486 will. RU486 is not available over the counter right now. You do have to, supposedly get a prescription, but getting a prescription takes approximately 5 minutes online. And you don't even have to pay for it. So it's very easy. They do want you to stock up on these chemical abortion pills and on Plan B because they just expect that you're going to be having risky, unprotected sex. Because
which is also good for you. Let's do that.
We're just wild animals who can't control ourselves. And so, of course, we're just going to be having risky sexual behavior all over the place. And so they want you to stock up on Plan B because they think that we're going to be trying to ban birth control, which is not, that's not anything that conservatives have ever tried to do.
Or even care about.
Whatever. Take all the birth control you want, damage your body. We don't care.
Right.
Like, whatever, you want to give yourself a stroke by the time you're 35.
Right.
Do that, okay?
Yeah. You want to give yourself breast cancer? Be my guest.
Do it. Whatever. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
But the RU486 is different because that is taken most of the time. It's not supposed to be taken after 10 weeks gestation, but we know that these online providers are giving it to women no matter how far along they are in their pregnancy because they don't require that you talk to a doctor. You don't even have to talk to a nurse. You don't have to send in an ultrasound. You don't have to be pregnant at all to get the pills. You don't even have to be a woman. They're giving them to men.
Well, because men can have babies. Abby,
Yeah, I know.
get with the program.
But
Men can have
it's
babies.
scary. It's scary because like they're giving them to men, and like what are men going to do with them, right? Like they're
Yeah.
giving them to men
Could
so
it
that
be
they
possible
can
that you abuse a young girl and then say, "Oh, here"? Could could
exactly
could
so that
that
they can
maybe
put it in
happen?
somebody's drink or
Come
something,
on.
which we already know that has happened several times before. Like we
Mm-hmm.
know it's happened a lot, but like some men have actually gotten caught doing it. Like
Crazy.
that's just gross. Um, so and I mean, by the way, it's murder.
Yeah.
Um, But if you live in a state like yours or a state like Colorado or like they can't be charged for homicide because you don't
Yeah.
have prenatal protection laws. So it would just be like endangerment to the woman, but it would not be homicide of the fetus because you don't have prenatal protection laws in your
Mm-hmm.
state. So um that's kind of that's the dangerous slope that we're going down. That's a slippery slope that we're going down. But that these pills are dangerous. You are more likely to have a complication from a chemical abortion pill, an RU486 pill, than you are a surgical abortion. That's just facts. About 20% of women who take chemical abortion pills will have a serious complication like hemorrhage, infection, parts of their baby left inside of their uterus, which can create a serious infection, which can cause sepsis, which can lead to death. That is what we have seen already multiple times this year, uh, not because of pro-life laws, but because of abortion. There
Mm-hmm.
was a woman, Amber Thurman. She lived in Georgia. The pro-life laws protected her and protected her twin babies. She wanted to skirt around the law. She went up to North Carolina. She took legal chemical abortion pills for her twin babies. What they probably did not tell her is that with twin babies and babies over 7 weeks along, the one dose of chemical abortion pills, misoprostol, almost always is not enough medication. It's not enough micrograms to actually successfully empty out a uterus for twins and babies over 7 weeks along. And what they didn't tell her was that she was probably going to need a second dose. But she didn't live in North Carolina. She lived in Georgia. So she wasn't going to be able to get that second dose in Georgia because the law protected her and the law protected her babies. So she went home to Georgia. We have no idea what she said when she presented to the emergency room because every abortion clinic is telling women when you go to the emergency room, do not tell them that you've had an abortion, tell them that you've had a miscarriage. And so we have no idea what she said when she entered the emergency room. She may have told them that she was in the middle of a miscarriage. And a lot of times when women naturally miscarry, a doctor is going to be less invasive with a miscarriage patient than they will be with an abortion patient.
Mm-hmm.
Because most of the time, if you're having a miscarriage, you're miscarrying a wanted pregnancy. And so the doctor won't immediately go to a DNC if it's not warranted. Because a lot of times these women want to naturally deliver their baby at home
Mm-hmm.
because they want to take the remains of their baby and bury them.
Mm-hmm.
If it's an abortion, most of the women don't care. They just want to get the baby suctioned out. We have no idea what she told the hospital when she presented to them. But either way, by the time she presented to them, she was already septic.
Mm.
She died on the operating table. They were trying to remove her uterus because her twins were dead, but still in her womb because the medication had not emptied out her uterus. She died of a septic infection because of abortion. But of course, all of the pro abortionists are saying that it was pro life laws that killed her. No, it was not pro life laws that killed her. It was pro life laws that were trying to protect her in the first place. It was abortion that killed her.
Mm-hmm.
And in every case where these women are dying, they're almost always dying from chemical abortion. Chemical abortion is dangerous. And almost every time that a woman is septic from a chemical abortion, it's almost always too late to save her life by the time they present to the hospital because she's already been having symptoms. She's already been having pain. She's already been having fever. And so by the time she presents to the hospital, a lot of times it's too late to save her life. And it's certainly most of the times too late to save her fertility. And we're talking about girls that are 18, 19, 20 years old,
Yeah.
and they're losing their fertility before they're even in their 20s. It's sad, it's pathetic, and it has nothing to do with pro life laws. We are trying to save women, we are trying to save their children. If these women had never walked into an abortion clinic, they would still be alive today, and most likely, so would their children.
Yeah, yeah. We've got a lot of work to do going forward in the pro-life movement, and I have a lot of hope, and I know that you do too. That we're never going to stop fighting, never going to stop
No.
speaking out for the unborn. I think that the wind is at the back of the pro-life movement, even if the GOP is sloppy on the issue, and they absolutely are. How can people get involved? I mean, you've got obviously an extraordinary organization. And I have just been watching you for a long, long time. You have a tremendous voice. But there are a lot of people now who are realizing, oh, hey, it's not enough. I can't just sit here and hope that other people do the work. There's work to be done. If someone was listening to this today and they said, I want to get involved in the fight for life, where do you send people? How do you say, here's where you go, here's where you start?
So I would say, if you want to get involved in your local community, I always say that's best. Start there. Almost every community has a local pregnancy resource center. So if you just Google pregnancy resource center near me, something is going to pop up. These PRCs need you now more than ever.
Yes.
They are seeing an increase in patients since Roe's been overturned. They need funding like never before. They need client advocates. They need people who are willing to talk to these moms. They need guys that are willing to talk to the fathers.
Come
They're
on.
increasing their fatherhood programs. Look, I believe abortion could be ended almost overnight if every single man who fathered these children would step up and say, we're going to do this together.
Yeah.
Abortion exists because of because of the failure of men, and the failure of men to step up and say, we're going to do this together. I'm going to be responsible. I'm not going to let you walk in there and kill my child. And so we need to reverse this dangerous feminism that has been thrust on women and men and families. And we can do that by strong men standing up and standing against it. So we need men to join this fight. PRCs need you men. They need women to be client advocates. And you may say, there's no way I could ever talk to a woman who is thinking about having an abortion. That's fine. They need you in other ways. They need you to help with their baby boutique. They may need you to wash and fold little tiny baby clothes, to sort diapers, to do all kinds of things. Maybe they just need your money. Maybe they just need $25 a month. All of those things help. So I would say get involved there first. I would say get your church involved. If you don't have a pro-life committee at your church, maybe God is calling you to start one. Start small. Um, you know, have maybe once every 6 months a diaper drive at your church for your local pregnancy center. At our church, I made up little flyers. I laminated them, just saying this is a church that is safe for you if you are having an unplanned pregnancy. Here's our email for our pro-life group. Here's the email to our pastor. This is a place for you. You don't have to turn to the abortion clinic if you're in a crisis pregnancy. You can turn here, right? Women need to know that the church is a safe place for them, that they don't have to run to the enemy, right? But women don't know that unless you tell them that.
Come on.
And so we made flyers and we have them hanging up on the inside stall of every single bathroom in our church. And those have been great. That's something very simple that almost every pastor would get involved, it would get on board with. That's something simple you can do. Diaper drives. We now at our church every year, we have a candlelight vigil. Our pastor loves it. It's ecumenical. It's open to the community. We invite other pastors to come in too and pray. We have a candlelight vigil. It's a candlelight vigil for pregnancy loss, so miscarriage, stillbirth, and abortion. We invite people to hold a candle, to lay a candle at the altar and a flower in memory of the child that they lost. It's beautiful. It's healing. It's amazing. It's for the community. It's always very well attended. It provides so much healing and comfort for those who have lost a child. Little things like that you can start in your own church, in your own community. You can, all you need is a couple people. right?
Yep.
To
Yep.
get something started, and it can cause lasting change in your church and in your community. You just need a little group of friends and you can do big things. My mom had a little group of friends. There were 5 of them, and they started a whole pregnancy center in
Yep.
their community, right? With just 5 of them, and it's been going now for 12 years. So you just need a little bit of faith, a little group, and God is big, and He can do big things with your little bit of faith. And, our ministry, Love Line, is a crisis support line. We provide comprehensive case management for women who need help. We've helped over 4,000 moms, which represents over 10,000 children in the past 3 years. We need case managers, social workers, licensed counselors. If you're ever interested in volunteering with us, you can go to loveline.com and reach out. So there's so many ways to get involved. If you're a student, get involved with Students for Life. Start your own chapter on campus. So many ways you can get support. You can support life, but just little things. Share on your social media pages. Just little snippets about life.
Mm-hmm.
Have courage. Be
Yeah.
bold. Don't worry about offending people. Worry more about offending the heart of God than to be worried about offending the heart of your neighbor.
So good.
God's opinion is what matters at the end of the day. And we are all going to stand in front of Him at the end of our lifetime. We're not going to stand in front of our friends and our peers. We're going to stand in front of Him. And when He asks us, what did you do for the least of these? I hope that we all have a pretty good answer.
Wow, so good. In the last couple minutes that we have, talk to the woman who's listening to this right now who's had an abortion. I know that, this is going to be downloaded tens of thousands of times, and I guarantee you lots of women listening to this who still are suffering from the shame and the hurt and the regret of abortion. What's your message to those women?
Yeah, so I've had 2 abortions myself. I helped to facilitate over 22,000 abortions when I was at Planned Parenthood. And I certainly know the shame and the guilt surrounding those abortion choices. And, people ask me all the time, how did you heal from that? How did you heal from that sort of
Mm,
burden? And, I'll be honest, it took practice.
yeah.
It took practice to heal. It took practice to accept that God could actually forgive me of sins that great, right? But one day I finally woke up and realized, do I believe God is who He says He is, or do I not? Because
Hmm.
if I don't, then I'm basically calling God a liar. If I don't, then I am saying that I don't believe who God says He is, and that my pride is bigger than God's mercy.
Mm,
And like, how much pride do you have to believe that your sin is bigger than God's forgiveness? Like,
wow.
that's crazy. That doesn't even make sense, right? And so I just finally I every day I would get up and I would say, okay, am I going to choose to live today in God's grace and His mercy and His forgiveness? Or am I going to live in my past, the place that Satan lives, the
Yep.
place where he wants to remind me of where I've been? Our past, I believe, is Satan's playground.
Yep.
And he wants to keep throwing that in my face. Am I going to live in who Satan has called me to be from my past, or am I going to live in my present, this gift that God has given me every day? And I'm not going to lie to you, Heidi. There were some days, especially in the beginning, where I woke up and I lived in my past and I drank a whole bunch of wine and I took a bath for a long time and I just drank my sorrows away, right? And I
Hmm.
just threw a big old pity party for myself and I cried all day and I felt super sorry for myself. And then at the end of the day, I realized this is not a day that I glorified God.
Mm,
This was a day that I glorified the enemy.
yeah.
And this is not how I want to live. And every day, eventually, after choosing God and choosing His will every day, I just realized, how could I not choose this every day?
Mm,
This is what brings me joy. This is what glorifies Him. This is what takes my past sin and turns it into something beautiful.
hmm.
And so, how would I not? want to live in that every single day. And once I made that decision, it was like the bondage, it was like I was released
Yeah.
from that bondage. Now, that's not to say that I don't have hard days. That's not to say, it wasn't that long ago. I was actually at a speaking event here in Texas, and there was a woman who had had an abortion at the facility where I worked. And she came up to me, and she's pro-life now. She actually works at a pregnancy center here in Texas. And she came up to me and she said, I had an abortion at your clinic. And she said, I remember you. I
No.
remember you that day.
Oh, wow.
And that was terrible. That was hard for me. On this worst day of her life, she remembers me being there.
Wow.
And that was hard. I had to really sit down and kind of process through that, but I did. And God's grace got me through it. And he reminded me, Satan really wanted to drag me back
Yep.
to that place, that person that I once was. But God was like, no, that's not you anymore.
That's
Right.
right.
And God always wants to call me redeemed. And so I just have to keep reminding myself of that, even when I have these hard days. And it doesn't mean it's always easy. It doesn't mean that my past is gone. It's not that. But it just means that he has turned my heart into something new, that he has made me a new creation. And that's what God wants to do for everyone who is living in bondage, who's living in shame. He doesn't want us to live in shame. He wants us to live in freedom. And it's easy to say. It's easy to say if you haven't experienced it, but I really have experienced it. And I know it can be done, but it is not easy. And but I tell people, anytime I start having those thoughts come back in, like I visualize a stop sign and I just start reminding myself of all of the amazing gifts that God has given me and all of the good things God has done for me. And I immediately get into the Word. And I start, there's, some verses. I start looking into the Psalms. My favorite chapter in the Bible is Psalm 30. And it just reminds us, it's a psalm of deliverance. It just reminds us that he turns our everything in our past into something good. Our tears into rejoicing. He turns everything that is bad, everything that the enemy meant for bad, he turns it into good. And I think getting in the Word, staying in the Word, staying in conversation with God, staying in his will, that's how you release yourself from that bondage.
So good. It's so important. I love that you said that you wear the label redeemed. When the Lord of Heaven's armies labels you, no one else can relabel you. And that is how he sees you from now until eternity when we get to stand before him and hear, well done, well done. And I love that. We serve a loving God and he loves us. Abby Johnson, you are a national treasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I just appreciate your friendship and your voice. And let's continue to pray that the pro-life movement goes forth with power these next 4 years and see what God will do. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's just been a delight to have you.
Thank you, Heidi.
For more information on Abby Johnson, head on over to the show notes. You guys, I hope you're encouraged. Get off the bench, get onto the battlefield, love your people well, and I'll see you right back here again at the intersection of faith and culture.